Thank you for joining us on our YouTube channel as we strive to get a more progressive voice of faith out to a larger audience. Our videos are mostly from the pastor at Community Christian Church in Springfield, Missouri, Dr. Roger Ray. We are always pleased to have feedback from our viewers. You can visit our website at spfccc.org or write to us at reverend.drray@aol.com.
I did not actually know the storyline of Les Miserables when I first went to see it in a theater in Louisville, Kentucky. But when the main character, Jean Valjean, was taken into the home of a Catholic bishop, Mariel, I felt myself tense up because this couldn't go well. And then in the play, Jean Valjean rises in the night, steals the bishop's silverware, and runs away. But he's almost immediately apprehended by the police and brought back to the bishop's home. And I just felt this sickness about what's going to happen next. I was prepared for the worst. I expected Bishop Mariel to demand that Jean Valjean be returned to prison or perhaps even executed. Because every time a minister or priest or religious official shows up in a TV show, in a movie, in a play, they are portrayed in one of two ways. One is that they're either a completely incompetent moron, or they are portrayed as being evil, hypocritical, and dangerous human beings. I was the most surprised patron in the theater that day when the bishop very quickly and very cleverly welcomes Jean Valjean and scolds him for having forgotten the 2 silver candelabras that were worth more than the rest of the silverware, insisting to the police that it had been a gift. There was no punchline. There was no joke, no manipulation, no demand of some great favor to be paid to the bishop for saving Jean Valjean from returning to prison. And he didn't take the silver back. He let him keep the silver and gave him the 2 silver candlesticks with just this insistence, that he used the proceeds to become a good man. Now, people often seem to be absolutely thrilled to think ill of the clergy. And I can tell you that with 32 years of experience as a pastor, you can never be right enough to avoid that. You will appear to be hypocritical to someone who is determined to either point at the speck in your eye or put one there if they can't find one. So let me be quick to apologize for everything else I'm about to say. And I recognize that it is not an accident that I'm the one standing up here behind the pulpit. I am a pastor. I think I'm different from most other pastors, but that's one of the most arrogant things anyone can ever say. I can't remember the Latin phrase for I am not like other men, but that is one of the greatest sources of hubris. Inside my skin, I don't think that I'm like other pastors, but I recognize that I am a part of that band of priests and preachers, of pastors and religion professors. I'm one of them, and I share in all their faults. Which puts me in a rather uncomfortable spot when we turn to this passage from Isaiah that's printed in your bulletin today. This passage, by the way, does not show up in the common lectionary. Most mainstream denominations read 1, 2, 3, or 4 passages of Scripture from the lectionary, which is intended in one way or another to get a church to hear almost the entire Bible over a course of 3 years. But this text is not in the common lectionary. And unless you have a minister who's willing to kind of go off the rails a bit, the congregation would never know that it existed. Not if you go to a Catholic church or Presbyterian or Methodist or Disciple or UCC or Lutheran or Episcopal or even an Orthodox church, you'll never hear this passage read. And since it does not show up in a preaching cycle, my suspicion is that most of those other pastors previously referenced wouldn't even know that it's in the Bible. They've never read it. Because if they did read it, it would just make them madder. I guess since we're talking about ministers and saying it in church, we can say literally, it'd make them madder than hell. They would not like this text. But the prophet Isaiah is clearly in no mood to try to play nice and just get along with other religious leaders. You know how often, when I have to go to a clergy meeting, you want me to be nice. I mean, you want me to be a guy that gets along with everybody else and doesn't start fights. You'd like for me to be on good behavior when I'm hanging out with the clergy. We want everyone to be sweet, and even when we disagree, we want to know that other people, they have a right to their belief. That's their belief. You have your. Everyone has a right to be just as big a jerk as they think they want to be. That's their right. But Isaiah doesn't think so. Isaiah feels like the clergy have some culpability. They've got a responsibility to be better than that. And so he starts this diatribe. Well, he just starts off calling them a bunch of drunks. You see in verse 7, these also reel with wine and stagger with strong drink. The priest and the prophet reel with strong drink. They're confused with wine. They stagger with strong drink. They err in vision. They stumble in giving judgment. All the tables are covered with filthy vomit. No place is clean. Now, of course, he's not being literal. It isn't that they're all just drinking all the time. It is that they are acting stupid, as if their brains were pickled. Their sermons, their teaching, their guidance, Isaiah says, it's like vomit. Everything they say is like vomit. And then Isaiah leaves the drunken fraternity party and turns to another image. He says in verse 9 and following, whom then will he teach? And to whom will he explain the message? Those who are weaned from the milk? Those taken from the breast? For it is precept upon precept, precept upon precept, line upon line, line upon line, here a little, there a little. The image is like someone in a classroom. Who will he teach? A little, here a little is like a child, a young person, weaned from the breast, someone just old enough to start being taught. Isaiah is on the surface of it chiding them for having reduced religious life to a bunch of rules, a bunch of beliefs, as if God lives inside your head somewhere, and that all that God is concerned about is you thinking the right things, believing the right sets of doctrines, which is, if you think about it, just absolutely useless. It's just a childish enterprise. But Hebrew scholars say that there's actually a little bit more to his use of language here, where he says that their religion is just precept upon precept, precept upon precept, line upon line, line upon line, here a little, there a little. They say that he's imitating the sound that a baby makes before they can talk, a kind of baby prattle. In Hebrew, it goes kavlakav, kavlakav, savlasov, savlasov, siershom, siershom. If you say it fast, it sounds just like a baby babbling. So, do you baptize by immersion or by sprinkling? Do you baptize infants or people that are old enough to make what we call an adult decision that those 8-year-olds make when you baptize them? Do you take communion every week or just every quarter? Does your pastor wear a clerical collar or a t-shirt? Do you believe that you have to invite Jesus into your heart to be saved, or do you believe you also have to speak in tongues? Do you confess the Apostles' Creed or the Nicene Creed? Or is it just that you have to believe that Jesus died for your sins? Is it necessary to believe in the Trinity, incarnation, sacraments, clergy? Isaiah would look at the church of our day and the gathering of priests and pastors. Oh, can't you see it now? If he just walked in there, can't you hear him saying, your religion is childish. It's insulting. It amounts to a bunch of vomit on a table. You've taken this world-changing message of justice, of peace, of genuine love and concern for each other, and you've turned it into precept upon precept, precept upon precept, line upon line, line upon line, here a little, there a little. And so the prophet says to us, just as he said to the priests in Jerusalem 2,500 years ago, truly, verse 11, truly with stammering lip and an alien tongue he will speak to this people, to whom he has said, this is rest. Give rest to the weary, and this is repose. But you would not hear it. This is what you were told. Give relief to the weary. Can't you see the poor all around you? Can't you see the laborers? This is what I ask you to do, to care about justice, to care about the vulnerable. What is this? Believe this, invite this, do this, do what childish vomit is this? Verse 13, therefore the word of the Lord will be to them. Precept upon precept, precept upon precept, line upon line, line upon line, here a little, there a little, that they may fall backward and be broken and snared and taken. In an article published in the Huffington Post this week, Diana Butler Bass summarized her new book, which is entitled The End of Church. And she notes that a mere generation ago, half of all Americans were in church on Sunday morning, and that number is down by half now. 1 out of 10 Americans describe themselves as being an ex-Catholic. And even as megachurches arise within the conservative wing of religion, their total numbers are plummeting. The majority of churches in America have fewer than 40 people in their worship services on Sunday morning. And if we could ask Isaiah about that, he would probably say, good. It may be that the institutional church, particularly the mainstream denominational churches, will have to die if faith has a chance of being reborn. I say that with some fear and trepidation as we are now having these meetings to talk about expanding our building, trying to grow, trying to add classrooms, because even though our church has had a very successful start, we should be aware that all churches in America are being built over the top of an open grave. And it would take very, very little to fall in. If we abandon the message of liberation and compassion and just go all religious, teaching precept upon precept, precept upon precept, line upon line, line upon line, then we too deserve to be buried. And I'll sing at the funeral. We either have the courage and faith to keep kicking at the darkness, or we should turn off the lights. You've heard me say it before, and I suspect you'll hear me say it again. As Leon Bloy said, any Christian who's not a hero is a pig. We need to quit trying to get people to be believers and get them to start being followers, disciples of that famous liberator whom we sometimes call the Buddha, sometimes we call Confucius, sometimes we call Moses, but around here most often we call him Jesus. And if we're not willing to follow, then what you believe between your ears doesn't matter at all.
Amen.
You've been watching a progressive Christian video from the Community Christian Church of Springfield, Missouri. We encourage our viewers to donate to our efforts in feeding the homeless and hungry of our community. Write to us at reverenddray@aol.com for more information.